The blue-skinned Ambassador Kelnar of the Thulian species walked slowly into the United Nations emergency session. His four eyes blinked in sequence as he surveyed the room filled with human representatives. The fate of Earth, and possibly the entire Galactic Alliance, depended on this meeting. "People of Earth," Kelnar began, his translator device converting his high-pitched clicks into English. "My civilization and 16 other advanced species have fought the Vrax Dominion for 3 years. We are losing. We need your help." The human delegates looked at each other with confusion and fear. Mankind had only discovered faster-than-light travel 5 years ago. They had barely begun to explore beyond their solar system when the Thulians had made contact. "Why come to us?" asked United States Ambassador Julia Winters. "Earth is not part of your alliance. We have no advanced weapons like yours." Kelnar's upper eyes closed, a sign of respect among his kind. "You have something more valuable. Your soldiers." Murmurs spread through the assembly hall. The Thulian tapped a device on his wrist, and a hologram appeared above the central podium. It showed a massive warship breaking apart under enemy fire. "This was 3 weeks ago. Our 13th consecutive defeat. The Vrax are stronger and their technology is superior, but they lack what you humans possess." "Which is what?" asked the Chinese representative. "Savagery," Kelnar said simply. "The ability to keep fighting when all hope is gone, the will to endure pain that would cripple our species, the capacity for violence that shocks even our oldest military leaders." The room went silent. "Ambassador Kelnar," said General Howard from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, "are you suggesting you want to recruit human soldiers to fight your war?" "Yes. The Vrax have conquered over 300 worlds. They consume all biological matter to fuel their hive mind expansion. If we fall, Earth will eventually face them alone." In the back of the room, Lieutenant Ethan Morris listened carefully. At 32 years old, he had served 3 tours in the Middle East. Combat was something he understood well. He stood up. "Volunteer," Ethan said loudly. Every head in the room turned toward him. "Lieutenant Morris, stand down," General Howard ordered. "Sir, with respect, the ambassador is right. I've reviewed the data they shared about these Vrax. If they reach our solar system, we're finished. Better to fight them out there with allies than wait for them here." Ambassador Kelnar's translator struggled to convey his emotion, but his body language showed clear relief. "The human understands. We need 5,000 volunteers to start. We will provide training and equipment." Dr. Samantha Wright watched this exchange with fascination. As Earth's leading exobiologist, she had been studying the limited data on alien species since first contact. She raised her hand. "Ambassador, human physiology is very different from Thulian. How will your technology work with our biology?" "That is why we need scientists like you, Dr. Wright," Kelnar replied. "You will work with our research team to adapt our systems for human use." Within a week, the decision was made. Earth would join the fight. News feeds worldwide showed lines of military veterans volunteering for what was named Project Minuteman. Lieutenant Morris was assigned as military liaison to Dr. Wright's scientific team. "I still don't understand why they think we can make a difference," Samantha said as she and Ethan flew on the shuttle to the Thulian ship in orbit. "Their civilizations are thousands of years ahead of ours." Ethan looked out the window at Earth, growing smaller below them. "Technological advancement and fighting spirit aren't the same thing, Doc. Sometimes being too civilized makes you forget how to win a dirty fight." The Thulian battlecruiser Starlight Defender was massive beyond anything. Humans had built nearly 5 miles long. Inside, Ethan and Samantha were led to the command center where Admiral Zor, the supreme military commander of the Alliance forces, waited. Admiral Zor was not Thulian. He belonged to a species called the Vendari, tall, with gray skin and long limbs. He studied the humans carefully before speaking. "Our latest intelligence reports indicate the Vrax have targeted the Rigel system. It will fall within 3 months unless we can stop them. If Rigel falls, they will have a clear path to Earth sector." He showed them battle footage that made even Ethan wince. The Vraks were insectoid creatures with multiple limbs and powerful exoskeletons. They fought with perfect coordination, like one organism rather than individual soldiers. Their hive mind gives them perfect battlefield awareness, Admiral Zor explained. But it may also be a weakness. Individual Vraks drones cannot function well when cut off from the collective. Dr. Wright immediately saw the implication. So disrupting their communication might be effective? Yes, but our forces always retreat when losses reach a certain threshold. The Vraks know this and exploit it. Our species have become predictable. Humans don't always act logically in combat, Ethan said. That might throw them off. Over the next month, as more human volunteers arrived at the Luna training facility, the differences between species became clear. Alliance training simulations were designed to maximize efficiency and minimize casualties. Human military doctrine included concepts like acceptable losses, sacrifice plays, and fighting retreat, ideas that horrified their alien counterparts. During one simulation against Vraks tactics, Captain Frank Delgado's unit suffered heavy virtual casualties but achieved their objective by having the wounded continue fighting rather than evacuate as Alliance protocol demanded. You allowed 30% of your force to die, the Thulian instructor said, clearly disturbed. But we took the target, Frank replied. And in a real fight, adrenaline would keep most of those dead soldiers fighting longer. The aliens had no concept of adrenaline until human medical data was shared. The information stunned Alliance scientists. Humans could temporarily override pain, fatigue, and even serious injury through biochemical responses triggered by danger. When Dr. Wright's team connected humans to Alliance neural interface systems, another surprise emerged. The interfaces were designed to distribute the mental load of operating advanced weapons across multiple operators. Humans could handle neural loads that would incapacitate other species. Their pain thresholds are remarkable, a Thulian scientist reported. And their minds adapt to our technology faster than predicted. After 6 weeks of training, the first real test came unexpectedly. A Vraks scout force attacked an Alliance outpost near Jupiter. 30 human soldiers who were training nearby were rushed to assist the defending Alliance troops. What followed shocked both allies and enemies. The humans fought with a ferocity that violated all Alliance combat protocols. They took risks, used improvised weapons, and kept fighting despite injuries that should have been debilitating. The Vraks, encountering such behavior for the first time, faltered. Their perfect coordination briefly fragmented as they tried to process this new combat style. The scout force was destroyed completely, the first clear victory for the Alliance in over a year. When the battle recordings reached Alliance High Command, Admiral Zor made his decision. Project Minuteman would be accelerated. Earth had proven its value. As Lieutenant Morris helped load wounded soldiers onto medical transports, Ambassador Kelnar approached him. Perhaps, the Thulian said quietly, what we needed all along was a touch of savagery. The Luna training facility grew larger every week. What had started with a few thousand volunteers now housed nearly 5,000 human soldiers from countries across Earth. The gray, dusty surface of the moon was now covered with Alliance structures, training grounds, and landing pads. Captain Frank Delgado watched from the observation deck as a new shuttle arrived with the latest group of recruits. A former Army Ranger with 15 years of combat experience, Frank had quickly risen to become the unofficial leader of the human contingent. The aliens respected his tactical mind and calm under pressure. Another 100 soldiers, said Lisa Martinez, who stood beside him. Before joining Project Minuteman, she had been a tactical analyst for NATO. At this rate, we'll have a full fighting force within 2 months. Frank nodded. If the Vraks give us that long. The door slid open behind them and Admiral Zor entered with Dr. Wright. The Vendari Admiral had spent more time with humans than any other Alliance leader and was beginning to understand their ways. Captain Delgado, we need to discuss the latest training results, said Admiral Zor. They are unexpected. The 4 of them gathered around a holographic display table. Dr. Wright activated it, showing performance data from the latest combat simulations. Humans are scoring 80% higher than any Alliance species in direct combat scenarios, she explained. But what's really interesting is why. She highlighted a section of data. It's not just physical strength or endurance. It's decision-making under pressure. Humans make unconventional choices when standard tactics fail. Admiral, Zor's long fingers traced a pattern in the air, changing the display. This concerns me. Your soldiers disregard safety protocols. They take unnecessary risks. With respect, Admiral, Frank replied. Those risks wouldn't be necessary if the standard tactics worked. But they don't work against the Vraks. That's why you're losing the war. The Admiral's expression was hard to read, but his posture showed he was troubled. Perhaps. But there is another issue. The neural interfaces. Dr. Wright took over the explanation. The neural load for controlling Alliance weapons is normally distributed across 3 to 5 operators. Humans can handle the load alone. 1. Human can operate systems that typically require multiple aliens. Lisa studied the data carefully. This changes everything about combat doctrine. Smaller crews mean more ships with the same personnel, faster reaction times, more tactical flexibility, and more casualties if those ships are destroyed, Admiral Zor countered. Frank looked the Admiral directly in his 4 vertically aligned eyes. War isn't about preventing all casualties. It's about achieving objectives while minimizing them. Sometimes you have to risk lives to save more lives. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. This concept is difficult for many Alliance species to accept. We have lived in peace for so long that the cost of war seems too high. But the cost of defeat is higher, Lisa said quietly. Their discussion was interrupted by an emergency alert. A holographic message appeared above the table. Alliance High Command requesting immediate communication. When the connection was established, Ambassador Kelnar's blue face appeared. Admiral, we have reports of Vraks activity near Jupiter. A small force, possibly a scout mission. Frank and Lisa exchanged glances. Jupiter was far too close to Earth for comfort. We have a destroyer in that sector, Admiral Zor replied. The Steadfast Light. It can intercept in 3 hours. The Steadfast Light has already engaged but is outnumbered, Kelnar said. They request immediate assistance. Dr. Wright checked her tablet. We have 30 human soldiers who have completed advanced weapons training. They're not fully prepared for space combat, but we're ready, Frank interrupted. Give us a ship. Within an hour, 30 human soldiers were aboard the Alliance cruiser Swift Horizon, heading toward Jupiter at maximum speed. Frank led the mission, with Lisa coordinating tactical response from the Luna base. The humans were equipped with Alliance combat suits, sleek armor that enhanced strength and protected against space conditions. Each was neural-linked to their weapon systems, a process that would have required 3 alien operators per station. Remember your training, Frank told his team as they approached the battle zone. The Vraks rely on perfect coordination. Disrupt that, and they become vulnerable. Be unpredictable. The scene that greeted them was grim. The Steadfast Light was surrounded by 5 Vraks attack vessels, its shields failing under concentrated fire. Standard Alliance protocol would be to call for retreat, said the Swift Horizon's Thulian captain. We're not retreating, Frank replied. Prepare for direct engagement. What followed shocked both allies and enemies. The human-operated weapon systems fired in patterns the Vraks had never encountered. Instead of the methodical, predictable Alliance tactics, the humans used rapid target switching, feints, and concentrated fire on unexpected weak points. Private Jeff Miller, a former tank gunner from Oklahoma, noticed something in the Vraks formation. Their ships maintain precise distances from each other. What if that's important to their hive-mind connection? Acting on this insight, the humans focused fire on 2 Vraks ships simultaneously, forcing them to break formation to avoid collision. The effect was immediate. The separated ships became noticeably slower to react. It's working, Frank called out. Push them apart. The Swift Horizon dived between 2 Vraks vessels, weapons blazing on both sides. The maneuver was reckless by Alliance standards. putting the ship at risk from multiple angles, but it further disrupted the Vrax formation. With their perfect coordination broken, the Vrax ships began to make mistakes. One fired too late as the swift horizon changed course unexpectedly. Another failed to raise shields in time against a barrage from the recovered steadfast light. On the command deck, Private Steve Allen took a hit when his console exploded. Despite burns across his arms, he crawled back to his station. "You need medical attention," the Thulian medic insisted. "Later," Steve grunted, resuming fire control. This behavior astonished the Alliance crew. Their own species would have been incapacitated by such pain, yet the human continued fighting. Within 40 minutes, the battle was over. 3 Vrax ships were destroyed, and 2 retreated. The swift horizon had sustained damage, but nothing critical. More importantly, the steadfast light had been saved, along with its crew of 200 Alliance personnel. As the ships returned to Luna, news of the victory spread quickly. It was the first time a Vrax attack had been decisively defeated, rather than simply survived. In the medical bay, Dr. Wright examined the injured humans. "This confirms our theories about pain tolerance and stress response," she told Admiral Zor. "No Alliance species could have maintained combat effectiveness with these injury levels." The Admiral watched as medics treated Steve Allen's burns. "He should not have been able to continue functioning." "That's what makes humans different," Samantha explained. "We don't always do what seems logical or possible." Back on Earth, news of the Jupiter victory caused a surge in volunteers for Project Minuteman. Training facilities were expanded and production of human-adapted combat systems accelerated. The Alliance had found its secret weapon. The war was far from over. But for the first time in 3 years, there was hope of victory. 6 months after Project Minuteman began, the Alliance was ready to take the offensive. Colonel Patricia Harper stood on the bridge of the Alliance carrier vessel Luminous Dawn, watching as her battalion of human soldiers prepared for their first major deployment. The ship was heading to the Rigel sector, where the Alliance had been steadily losing ground for months. Patricia had served 20 years in the United States Army before volunteering for Project Minuteman. At 45, she was older than many of the other human soldiers, but her experience in strategic planning had earned her command of the 1st Human Battalion. "Colonel, the Thulian High Command is requesting a final briefing before we enter the combat zone," said her communications officer, Lieutenant Greg Russell. Patricia nodded and straightened her new Alliance uniform. The dark blue material was lighter than anything she had worn on Earth, but stronger than steel. The holographic conference room filled with the images of Alliance commanders from various species. Admiral Zor and Ambassador Kelnar were there, along with 5 other high-ranking officers Patricia hadn't met before. Colonel Harper began a reptilian commander from a species called the Veridon. "Your battle plan contains tactics that violate standard Alliance protocols. Explain your reasoning." Patricia activated a holographic display showing the Vrax defensive positions around the Rigel colony worlds. "The Vrax expect you to follow those protocols. That's why they keep winning. We need to surprise them." "By splitting your forces into small teams?" asked another commander. "This increases risk unnecessarily. Small teams can move faster and hit multiple targets simultaneously," Patricia explained. "The Vrax hive mind struggles to process multiple unexpected threats." Admiral Zor spoke up. "The Colonel's assessment is supported by data from our previous engagements. Human unpredictability confuses Vrax coordination." After much debate, the High Command reluctantly approved the plan. As the meeting ended, Ambassador Kelnar remained behind. "Colonel, there is something you should know," the Thulian said quietly. "Some Alliance leaders are uncomfortable with human combat methods. They find them unnecessarily violent." Patricia wasn't surprised. "We do what works, Ambassador. The Vrax don't surrender. They don't take prisoners. This isn't a clean war." "I understand," Kelnar replied. "But please remember that you are not just fighting for Earth. You represent humanity to the entire Alliance. Some are watching to see if you are as savage as they fear." The Luminous Dawn arrived at the Rigel sector 3 days later. The Vrax had established a blockade around Rigel 4, an Alliance mining colony with valuable resources. Previous Alliance attempts to break the blockade had failed with heavy losses. Patricia's battalion deployed in 20 small assault craft, each carrying 15 soldiers, while the main Alliance fleet engaged the Vrax head-on. As expected, the human teams approached from multiple vectors, using the system's asteroid belt for cover. The assault craft were piloted by Ethan Morris, who had been promoted to captain after his performance in training. He led his team toward a weak point in the Vrax defense grid. "Remember, we hit hard and fast," Ethan told his team. "The Vrax don't expect attacks from behind their own lines." Meanwhile, Dr. Wright had joined the mission as a scientific observer. She monitored the neural interfaces from the Luminous Dawn's medical bay, collecting data on human performance under actual combat conditions. Their stress hormones are elevated, but mental function remains optimal, she reported to Admiral Zor. The neural load would incapacitate any Alliance species, but the humans are handling it efficiently. The first phase of Patricia's plan worked perfectly. The human teams slipped through the Vrax blockade while their attention was focused on the main Alliance fleet. Each team had a specific target: power generators, communication relays, sensor arrays. On the surface of Rigel 4, Scott Cooper led his squad toward the main Vrax ground installation. Scott had been a Navy SEAL on Earth, specializing in covert operations. His team moved silently through the colony's abandoned streets. "This isn't like any combat zone I've seen before," whispered Laura Kim, the team's medic. The buildings around them were partially consumed, with strange organic growths covering the walls. "It's like they're eating the colony." "That's exactly what they're doing," Scott replied. "The Vrax consume everything to fuel their expansion." When they reached the main installation, they discovered it was larger than intelligence had suggested. Hundreds of Vrax drones moved with precise coordination, harvesting materials and expanding their base. Scott adjusted the plan. Instead of a direct assault, they would plant explosives at structural weak points, then trigger them simultaneously to cause maximum confusion. As they worked, the comms channel suddenly crackled with urgent messages. The main Alliance fleet was taking heavy damage. A Thulian cruiser, the Starlight Defender, had lost engine power and was drifting toward the Vrax command ship. "They'll be destroyed in minutes," Patricia's voice came through. "We need more time to complete the mission." Scott made a quick decision. "My team can provide a distraction. We'll engage the Vrax ground forces directly." "That's suicide," Patricia replied. "There are too many of them." "Not if we use the colony's mining equipment," Scott said. "Those excavators have reinforced cabins. We can use them as assault vehicles." Without waiting for approval, Scott's team raced toward the mining depot. They found 3 massive excavators, each the size of a small house. The machines were designed to break through Rigel 4's dense rock formations. "Laura, you take the first one. Ben, the second. I'll take the third," Scott ordered. "The rest of you complete the original mission." The Vrax never expected an attack by mining equipment. The massive machines crashed through the perimeter of their installation, crushing smaller drones and creating chaos. The hive mind struggled to process this unprecedented assault, momentarily diverting attention from the space battle. That brief distraction was enough. The disabled Thulian cruiser managed to restart one engine and limp away from danger. Meanwhile, the other human teams completed their sabotage missions. When the explosives detonated across the Vrax installation, the synchronized destruction overloaded the hive mind's ability to coordinate. Vrax ships in orbit suddenly lost efficiency, their movements becoming sluggish and predictable. The Alliance fleet, led by Admiral Zor, seized the opportunity and pushed forward. For the first time, they penetrated the Vrax blockade. Scott's excavator took heavy damage as Vrax drones swarmed over it. When the machine stopped moving, Laura tried to contact him. "Scott, can you hear me? We need to withdraw." There was no response. Scott had used himself as bait, drawing the majority of Vrax drones toward his position so the others could escape. When Alliance forces finally secured the colony 3 hours later, they found Scott's body in the crushed excavator. He had fought until the very end, taking dozens of Vrax with him. Admiral Zor personally oversaw the recovery of Scott's remains. This human sacrificed himself to save the Starlight Defender and its crew of 300, he announced to the Alliance fleet. Such courage deserves our highest honor. That day marked a turning point. The Alliance had won its first major victory against the Vracs. More importantly, the human way of war, adaptable, unpredictable, and sometimes terrifyingly savage, had proven effective against an enemy that had seemed unbeatable. As news of the victory spread across Alliance space, Dr. Wright continued her research. It's not just our physical capabilities, she explained to Ambassador Kelnar. It's our emotional responses. Humans fight harder when protecting others or avenging fallen comrades. The ambassador considered this. Perhaps what we called savagery is something else entirely, something we had forgotten in our centuries of peace. Determination, Samantha suggested. The unwillingness to accept defeat, no matter the odds. News of the victory at Rigel 4 spread rapidly across Earth. Military recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers eager to join the fight against the Vracs. Within 3 months, the human expeditionary force grew to over 50,000 strong. Vice Admiral George Winters, a decorated naval officer with 30 years of service, was appointed as its commander. The Alliance High Command, impressed by human combat effectiveness, began incorporating human officers into their strategic planning teams. Captain Frank Delgado found himself working directly with Admiral Zor to redesign Alliance combat doctrine. The Vracs have never faced an enemy that fights like humans, Frank explained during a strategy session. They expect logical, predictable responses because that's how all Alliance species have fought for centuries. Admiral Zor nodded, his long gray fingers tracing battle plans on the holographic display. We have become comfortable in our approaches. Even our victories followed established patterns. Lisa Martinez, now a major and chief tactical analyst, pulled up data from recent engagements. The Vracs are already trying to adapt to our methods. Their response time against unconventional attacks has improved by 20%. Then we need to become even more unpredictable, Frank said. We need to attack them psychologically, not just physically. This concept was alien to most Alliance species. They had always approached warfare as a mathematical problem, calculating acceptable losses and resource expenditure. The idea of psychological warfare was both fascinating and disturbing to them. Meanwhile, on the research vessel Quantum Horizon, Dr. Wright made a breakthrough. Working with Kelly Ramirez, a specialist in communications technology, she had been studying captured Vracs equipment. Their technology isn't actually superior to Alliance tech, Kelly explained as she dismantled a Vracs communication device. It's just optimized differently. They sacrifice individual functionality for collective efficiency. Dr. Wright ran a series of tests on the neural patterns the device emitted. The Vracs hive mind depends on constant communication between all units. What if we could disrupt that? Kelly's eyes lit up. Like jamming a radio signal, but for their thoughts. The two women worked for weeks, reverse engineering Vracs technology to understand its vulnerabilities. When they finally presented their findings to Alliance Command, even the usually stoic alien leaders showed signs of excitement. You're saying we could temporarily sever the connection between Vracs drones and their command centers? Admiral Zor asked. Exactly, Samantha confirmed. Not permanently, but long enough to cause confusion on the battlefield. The Alliance immediately authorized resources for developing what they called the Dissociation Field Generator. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists, combining their different approaches to problem solving. While the research progressed, the war continued. Human-led strike teams began reclaiming territories that had been lost to the Vracs. Each victory boosted Alliance morale and attracted more alien species to join their cause. One of these victories came at the Thulian homeworld, which had been under Vracs occupation for over a year. Colonel Patricia Harper led the Liberation Force, using tactics that would have been considered reckless by Alliance standards just months earlier. Instead of a frontal assault on Vracs positions, Patricia divided her forces into hundreds of small teams that infiltrated the planet simultaneously from multiple drop points. Each team had a specific objective, but was given freedom to adapt their approach based on local conditions. Trust your instincts, Patricia told her soldiers before the mission. The Vracs think as one mind. We think as many. That's our advantage. The battle for the Thulian homeworld lasted 3 days. Human soldiers fought alongside Thulian resistance fighters who had been waging a guerrilla war against the occupiers. The combination of human combat tactics and local knowledge proved devastating to Vracs' forces. When the planet was finally secured, billions of Thulians emerged from hiding to celebrate their liberation. Images of human soldiers being embraced by grateful Thulians were transmitted across Alliance space. Overnight, humans went from being viewed as primitive savages to honored allies. Ambassador Kelnar personally thanked Patricia in a ceremony at the restored Thulian capital. "My people owe their freedom to human courage and determination," he said, his 4 eyes blinking with emotion. "We will never forget this debt." As Alliance forces gained momentum, the Vracs' leadership did something unprecedented. They attempted to negotiate. A communication was sent to Alliance headquarters requesting peace talks. Vice Admiral Winters and the Alliance High Command gathered to discuss this unexpected development. Some alien leaders favored accepting the offer, tired of the costs of war. "The Vracs are facing defeat for the first time in their 1,000-year expansion," said a Viridian commander. "Perhaps they are finally willing to coexist peacefully." Admiral Zor looked skeptical. "Or perhaps they seek to buy time to regroup and develop countermeasures against human tactics." George Winters studied the Vracs' message carefully before speaking. "They're offering to stop their advance and maintain current territorial boundaries. That means they keep all the worlds they've already conquered and consumed." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "That is not unreasonable by traditional standards," Ambassador Kelnar said reluctantly. "Many conflicts in Alliance history have ended with similar compromises." "No," George said firmly. "Those worlds aren't just territory. They're populated planets where billions of beings are suffering under Vracs' control. We don't leave people behind. This human concept of fighting to liberate others, even at great cost to themselves, surprised many Alliance leaders. Their more pragmatic societies might have accepted the offer to save their own people. "What do you propose, Admiral Winters?" asked Admiral Zor. "We counteroffer. The Vracs must withdraw from all occupied worlds and return to their original territory. Nothing less." The Vracs rejected the counteroffer within hours. The war would continue. In the days that followed, Dr. Wright and Kelly Ramirez completed the prototype of their dissociation field generator. Initial tests showed promising results, temporarily disrupting Vracs' neural networks at short range. "If we can increase the range and power," Kelly explained to Vice Admiral Winters, "we could potentially affect an entire Vracs fleet at once." George nodded thoughtfully. "And if we could reach their central neural hub, the primary consciousness, that controls the entire hive mind, we might end the war without destroying their entire species," Samantha finished. "But the hub would be their most heavily defended location." The Admiral's face hardened with resolve. "Then we find it, and we hit it with everything we have." Around the same time, a disturbing report arrived from the front lines. The Vracs had begun developing weapons specifically designed to target human physiology. They had adapted, learning from their defeats. "They fear us now," Frank told Lisa when they reviewed the intelligence. "They recognize humans as their greatest threat." Lisa nodded grimly. "Good. Fear will make them react emotionally rather than logically. For once, they'll be the predictable ones." The stage was set for the final phase of the war. Humanity had changed the rules of engagement, introducing concepts of warfare that had been forgotten in millennia of civilized conflict. Victory, once thought impossible, now seemed within reach. The final phase of the war began with the most difficult mission yet, finding the Vracs' central neural hub. Alliance intelligence had narrowed its location to somewhere in the Deneb system, but the exact coordinates remained unknown. "It has to be heavily shielded against scans," said Lisa Martinez during the planning session. "Otherwise, we would have detected it by now." Vice Admiral Winters turned to Dr. Wright and Captain Morris, who had become inseparable in recent months, both professionally and personally. Their different perspectives had proven valuable time and again. "Any ideas?" George asked. Ethan thought for a moment. "If I were hiding something that important, I'd keep it moving. A mobile command center is harder to target." Samantha nodded in agreement. "And it would explain why our long-range scans never find it in the same place twice." This insight led to a new search strategy. Instead of looking for a fixed installation, Alliance scouts began tracking Vrak's fleet movements, looking for patterns that might reveal a protected central vessel. After weeks of careful observation, they found it, a massive ship, 3 times larger than any previously encountered Vrak's vessel, that always remained at the center of their formations, never engaging directly in combat. "That's it," George said, studying the scan data. "The heart of the hive mind." The Alliance Council gathered to discuss the implications. If they could reach the neural hub with Dr. Wright's dissociation field generator, they might be able to defeat the Vraks without destroying their entire species. "This weapon," asked the Viridian, "Representative, it does not kill?" "No," Samantha explained. "It disrupts the neural connection between individual Vraks and the central consciousness. They would survive as independent beings, but without their hive mind coordination." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some species argued that this was too merciful. The Vraks had consumed hundreds of worlds, killed trillions of beings. Many wanted complete extinction as revenge. Ambassador Kelnar called for order. "This is a moral decision as much as a military one. How we end this war will define our civilization going forward." All eyes turned to the human representatives. As the newest members of the Alliance, yet now its most effective fighting force, humanity's opinion carried significant weight. Vice Admiral Winters stood. "On Earth, we have a saying. The true measure of a civilization is how it treats its enemies. We can destroy the Vraks completely, or we can defeat them while giving them a chance to become something different. I vote for the latter." His words resonated with many council members. After hours of debate, the vote was cast in favor of using the dissociation field generator rather than pursuing total extermination. The plan was set. A joint strike team would penetrate Vrak's defenses around Deneb, reach the central hub ship, and deploy the generator at its core. General Frank Delgado, promoted after his successful tactics at multiple battles, would lead the military aspect of the mission. Dr. Wright and Captain Morris would handle the technical deployment of the device. They would be joined by Ambassador Kelnar, who insisted on representing the Alliance politically if contact with a disconnected Vrak's consciousness became possible. "This will be the most heavily defended target we've ever attacked," Frank told his soldiers during the briefing. "The Vraks will throw everything they have at us to protect their central mind." The strike force consisted of 50 ships, a small fleet by Alliance standards. But each vessel was crewed primarily by humans with support from various alien specialists. Speed and surprise would be their allies, not overwhelming numbers. As they prepared to depart, Lisa pulled Frank aside. "Intelligence reports the Vraks have developed new weapons specifically designed to target human neural patterns. They're adapting to us." Frank nodded grimly. "Then we'd better finish this quickly." The journey to Deneb took 3 days through hyperspace. When they arrived, the Vraks were waiting. Hundreds of enemy ships formed a protective barrier around their central hub. "They knew we were coming," Ethan said, scanning the massive enemy formation. "No," Samantha replied, studying sensor data. "They're always this well protected. This is their most valuable asset." Frank's tactical plan relied on distraction. While the main Alliance fleet engaged the outer Vrak's defenses, a smaller strike team would approach from below the ecliptic plane of the system, using a nearby gas giant's radiation to mask their approach. The battle began with violence that shocked even veteran Alliance commanders. Vrak ships fought with desperate intensity, sacrificing themselves without hesitation to protect their neural hub. Human gunners returned fire with equal determination, their neural interfaces allowing them to operate Alliance weapons with unprecedented speed and accuracy. On the command ship, Vice Admiral Winters directed the battle with calm precision. "Keep their attention focused on our main force. Give the strike team the time they need. Meanwhile, Frank's strike team made their approach. Their ship, a modified scout vessel with enhanced stealth systems, slipped through gaps in the Vrax formation. We're approaching optimal deployment range, Samantha reported, monitoring the dissociation field generator. 2 minutes to target. That's when disaster struck. A stray Vrax patrol detected their approach and opened fire. The strike team's ship took heavy damage to its propulsion systems. We're losing thrust, Ethan called out, fighting the controls. We'll never reach the optimal range now. Frank made a quick decision. We don't need to. We can use the emergency shuttles to get closer. Those shuttles have minimal shielding, Kelnar objected. It would be suicide. Not if we create enough confusion first, Frank replied. He opened a channel to all human ships in the main battle. This is General Delgado. We need a hole punch through Sector 7 of the Vrax defense grid. Hit them with everything you've got. The response was immediate. Human crewed alliance ships broke formation and concentrated fire on the designated sector, creating a temporary gap in the Vrax defenses. Now, Frank ordered. The strike team boarded 3 small shuttles, each carrying part of the team and components of the dissociation field generator. They launched toward the massive Vrax hub ship. Vrax defenders quickly responded, swarming toward the incoming shuttles. 2 were hit and began spinning out of control. We're not going to make it, Kelnar said, gripping his seat as their shuttle shuddered under enemy fire. Yes, we will, Ethan replied, pushing the engines beyond safe limits. With a final burst of speed, their shuttle crashed through the outer hull of the Vrax hub ship. The impact was violent. Frank and 3 others were seriously injured. Samantha quickly assembled the generator while Ethan and Kelnar defended their position against Vrax drones pouring in through nearby corridors. It's ready, Samantha called out, activating the device. But the range is limited. We need to get it to the central chamber. Frank, despite his injuries, struggled to his feet. I'll take it. No, Ethan said, handing his weapon to Kelnar. I'm faster. Give it to me. Before anyone could object, Ethan grabbed the device and sprinted down the corridor toward the center of the ship. Vrax drones fired at him, several shots grazing his body, but he kept running. The central chamber was massive, filled with strange organic technology surrounding a pulsing core of neural tissue. This was the primary consciousness that controlled the entire Vrax species. Ethan placed the generator directly against the core and activated it at maximum power. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the battle, Vrax ships suddenly stopped fighting in perfect coordination. Some ceased fire entirely, while others began moving erratically. The hive mind had been fragmented. For the first time, in their existence, each Vrax was an individual being with independent thoughts. When Alliance forces secured the hub ship hours later, they found Ethan barely alive near the central core. Medical teams rushed him and the other injured to treatment centers. In the days that followed, something unprecedented occurred. Individual Vrax began communicating with the Alliance, not as parts of a collective, but as separate beings with different perspectives. Some wanted to continue fighting, but many were experiencing individual existence for the first time and were curious rather than hostile. The war ended not with extermination, but with a new beginning. The Alliance Council, once intent on revenge, now faced the complex task of helping an entire species reconstruct their civilization as individuals rather than a hive. At a ceremony marking the official end of hostilities, Ambassador Kelnar addressed representatives from across the galaxy. Today marks a new chapter for all our species. What seemed impossible has been achieved, not through superior technology, but through the unique spirit that humans brought to our alliance. They showed us that sometimes what appears to be savagery is actually the deepest form of civilization. The willingness to risk everything to protect others and to offer mercy even to one's enemies. Vice Admiral Winters, standing nearby with his officers, nodded in agreement. Humans had changed the Alliance, just as the Alliance had changed humanity. Together, they had found a path to victory that preserved the best qualities of both. As, for Ethan and Samantha, they watched the ceremony from a hospital room where he was still recovering. Their hands were intertwined, a small but powerful symbol of the connections that had made victory possible, not just between humans, but between all thinking beings who chose hope over fear and life.